Hey y'all, today I'm gonna be sharing 5 really delicious dinner ideas. I really enjoy putting these videos together because I know how big of a pain it can be sometimes to have to figure out what's for dinner every single night. I know how exhausting that can be, so I like to think that I'm lessening that burden by showing y'all all these different recipes. I've got several of these what's for dinner videos. But yeah, I'm always on the hunt for new ideas. We're always trying out something new. And if this is your first time visiting my channel, I do my very best to cook on a budget. I'm always looking for the best deals, so always try to keep these meals affordable, but I really hope that you guys enjoy these recipes. First up, we're gonna try out this Mexican chicken Alfredo. So the first thing I'm gonna do is boil up half of this bag of penne pasta, and while that's cooking, to a large mixing bowl, I'm gonna add in 2 cups of some cooked chicken. You can definitely use rotisserie chicken, but I just baked up some chicken breasts, and that's what I'm using. You'll also need a jar of Alfredo sauce. Now, this was my first time buying the Rayos. I've never been the biggest fan of like jarred Alfredo sauces. I much prefer homemade, but I've heard a lot of people say this is the best one, and I can agree to that. But still, at the end of the day, homemade is always better. But in this dish, I'll go ahead and say that it works really well. So I'm also going to add in 3/4 cups of salsa. I'm using Mateo's. You'll also need a half a cup of, well, the recipe calls for ricotta, but I'm using cottage cheese. You'll also need a half a packet's worth of taco seasoning. And at this point, I'm just going to get everything stirred together good. Now, I did half this recipe because it's going to make the perfect amount for my family. My bunch is not big on leftovers, and plus, I'm trying to make 5 different recipes a week, so I don't want all those leftovers hanging out in my fridge. So this is what works best for us. But after that pasta was cooked, I drained it, and then I'm adding it into this bowl, and I'm just gonna get all of that pasta coated in that sauce. I do have my oven preheating to 350 degrees. After I got that mixed, I dumped it into a greased casserole dish. This is not a 9x13, even though it kind of looks like it. It does not have the measurements on it, so I have no idea, but it's actually kind of small. It just has like tall sides. It's just perfect for pasta dishes. But lastly, I'm going to top it with some of this shredded Parmesan cheese. I actually ordered the grated version, but it was a grocery pickup order, and this is what they substituted, which is completely fine. It worked out great. You could also use the kind that comes in the shaker bottle. Any Parmesan you want. But I'm going to get this dish covered tightly with tinfoil, and I'm going to bake it for 50 minutes. I thought that sounded like kind of a long bake time since everything is pretty much cooked in the dish anyways, but I just went with it, and it turned out absolutely perfect. So of course, I'm going to give y'all that first scoop to really get a close-up look at it. As you can see, it's not dry or anything. It had my kitchen smelling so good. We were so excited to dive in. I served it with some corn on the cob and some garlic bread, just 2 really simple side dishes. But you guys, this pasta was seriously so good. It turned out so much better than what I was expecting. The whole family loved it. My whole inspiration for making this was to use up that salsa in my fridge, and this was the first thing I stumbled upon, and I am so glad that I did. On this night, I'm going to be making some taco stuffed baked potatoes. The first thing I did was wash and scrub some russets. So here I'm just showing y'all the little scrub brush that I always use for my baked potatoes. I've had that for many years now. I remember I ordered that from Amazon, came in a 2-pack, and it's just been the handiest thing. But here I've got some jumbo bacon potatoes that I got on sale at Kroger, and I'm just preparing them how I always prepare my baked potatoes. They turn out perfect every single time. So after I wash them, I dry them off with a paper towel. I poke holes all over them, and then I drizzle them with olive oil and sprinkle on some sea salt, and I just massage that in with my hands, and I place them directly on my oven rack, and I bake them at 400 degrees for an hour. I do come in after 30 minutes and rotate them. So here we are after I've rotated those potatoes. I'm going to start working on everything else. So Here, I'm just making some basic taco meat. So I've got 1 pound of ground beef here that I am browning up. And I will say, this recipe is such a good way to stretch a pound of ground beef. If we were just having like a taco night, I would have to make at least 2 pounds to feed all of us. And, you know, this 1 pound, because of the potatoes, was more than enough. So I thought that was awesome, and I just wanted to share that. But here I am just doing the paper towel method to drain the grease. I'm just letting that absorb it all, and then I'm just going to toss it out. And then I know I've been showing this taco seasoning a lot lately. I got it from Costco, and I should have been buying this in bulk sooner because it's just so handy to have taco seasoning on hand at all time instead of always having to remember to pick up a pack at the store. It's just been so nice. But just use a packet of whatever taco seasoning that you want. Obviously, I added the water and let it thicken. So there we go. There's our taco meat. I'm just going to scoot that to the side and keep it on the lowest heat. And now for the best part about this recipe. It's this cheese sauce. So to this saucepan, I'm adding in 8 ounces of cubed up Velveeta. Here is 4 ounces of pepper jack cheese that I shredded myself. I'm also going to add in a 4-ounce can of mild green chilies, the juice and all. I did not drain it or anything. And then lastly, you'll need 5 ounces of evaporated milk. So I did go ahead and measure that out. And you're just going to stir this over a medium heat until it is all melted and smooth. It does not take long at all. And this cheese sauce is what takes this recipe over the top, I'm telling you. Now, I got this recipe from TikTok, so I am going to link that video down below in my description box. If you watch that video at the very end of it, she types out the recipe if you want to go and screenshot it. But my potatoes are out of the oven. They're perfectly fluffy, so I just added a little salt and pepper. And then I went in with plenty of that delicious cheese sauce. I'm telling you, I would have been happy with just this right here. I'm totally going to do that again as like a side dish with different dinners. We just thought that was the best thing. But I am going in with some of that taco meat, and then I'm just going to add my toppings. So I did some sour cream, some shredded pepper jack, shredded sharp cheddar. And while everything was cooking, I did go ahead and dice up some toppings. So just whatever toppings you would like on like your tacos. So I just did some diced tomatoes, some fresh jalapeno slices, and then some fresh cilantro, which I personally love. I think that this is beautiful. It's something different, and it was another one that we all really enjoyed. Now, my son did not want a baked potato this night. He just wanted regular tacos, but he did dip it in that cheese sauce, and he just kept going back for more. He loved it. But me, my husband, and my daughter, we all had the taco stuffed baked potatoes, and they were such a hit. And I feel like most people like tacos, most people like potatoes, so I was really excited to show y'all this. On this night, I'm going to be making some Greek chicken tenders. I got this recipe from Pinterest, and I just went and looked it up to remember the measurements to tell y'all, and the link is now blocked. I couldn't open it. I hate when that happens, but I was able to type it in Google and find the exact recipe that I used. I don't know if there's a way to like copy that link into my description box, so I'll just type out how I got to it in case y'all want the recipe. Also, my husband is mowing outside right now. I hope that's not too loud. I'm just trying really hard to get this video out regardless of everything going on around me. But I'm doubling this recipe because I knew that I would need a little bit more than what the recipe, stated. So the first thing I'm doing is making the marinade for the chicken. So all that is 4 tablespoons of olive oil, the juice of 1 lemon, a big spoonful of minced garlic, 2 teaspoons of dried thyme, 2 teaspoons of dried oregano, 2 teaspoons of paprika, a teaspoon of salt, and then I just eyeballed in some black pepper. And that's it for the marinade. So I'm just mixing it together really good. And then I'm going to start dropping in my chicken tenders. I ended up using around 2 pounds. And I've said this many times, but I love to buy my chicken tenders from Save A Lot because it's always the best deal. It's always a really good price, and they're always like a good size. It's good quality, all the things, but I'm just making sure to massage that in so that every inch of that is covered. So I'm just going to get this covered up with some cling wrap, and I'm going to set that in the fridge. You want to let it marinate for at least 30 minutes, but the longer the better. So while that's marinating, I'm going to get started on the side dish. I'm going to be making some lemon rice. I have been eyeing this recipe for a while, and I knew it would go so good with those chicken tenders. So I started by heating up a couple tablespoons of olive oil, and then once it was nice and hot, I dropped in a cup of long grain rice that I did wash first. I also dumped in a half a cup of some orzo, and I'm just going to stir this and kind of get everything toasted up with that oil. You want it to be a little bit golden brown before you start adding everything else in. So at that point, you need to add in 3 cups of chicken broth. I'm just subbing that with some water and some chicken bouillon powder. And then I'm going to go in with 4 tablespoons of some unsalted butter, and then a tablespoon of this Cavender's Greek seasoning. I have never used this before. This is my very first bottle that I have ever bought, and I just know that this dish was super flavorful. So I'm excited to use that in other ways. I also added in just a little bit of salt and pepper, and I'm just going to wait for this to come up to a boil. So once it reaches this point, I'm just going to simply cover it with a lid, turn it down to a simmer, and let it cook for 15 minutes. So during those 15 minutes, that's when I cooked up my chicken tenders. So I'm going to be using my electric skillet for this. I did drizzle in a little bit of olive oil first, and the reason I wanted to use my electric skillet is because it has so much surface area to it. So I knew that it would be able to hold all of these chicken tenders, and I wouldn't have to stand there and cook it in batches. So it's a time saver. And like I've said before, this specific electric skillet, it gets really hot really fast. So, it cooks up things quick. And, I have to constantly kind of adjust the temperature to lower it a little bit. It's still kind of a learning curve. I'm still, I've not had it too long, but I do really love it overall. And, chicken tenders cook up really quick. So just a few minutes per side. I know a lot of people get nervous when cooking chicken. I get it. If that's you, I highly suggest investing in a meat thermometer. They're not expensive. And, once it reaches 165, they're good. So once they were done, I transferred them to a plate and topped them with some dried parsley. And then by that point, the rice was done. So here I am just fluffing it all up. And lastly, I'm just going to add in some lemon zest. I love this zester that I got from Walmart. It makes this very easy to do, does it very quickly, and I absolutely love like a lemon zest, a lime zest. Any of that adds so much freshness to a dish. So I'm just going to take that same lemon, cut it in half so it can fit into my little juicer here, and I'm going to add in the juice of 1 whole lemon. Going to stir all that together to make sure it's coating everything, and then finally I'm just going to add a little bit more salt and pepper to taste, and that is it. I'm going to give y'all a close up here in a second, but this rice was seriously so flavorful, and I'm just so glad that I finally made this. It's going to be a new favorite side dish to go along with so many things. But here's my plate. I've got 2 of those chicken tenders, a big scoop of that rice, and I also served it with some steamed broccoli. These chicken tenders were amazing. They were so tender and juicy and flavorful. I'm sure that marinade had a lot to do with how tender these were. I've already bragged on that rice, but I was going for a lighter meal this night, and we absolutely loved everything. I'm about to share one of the best pasta salads that I've ever had. This is going to be a jalapeno popper pasta salad, and it's not spicy at all if you're worried about that. Now, I am cutting the recipe in half because, it's just a side for dinner for my family. If I was bringing this somewhere or, feeding more people, I would have kept it whole. But anytime I cut a pasta recipe in half, I always use my food scale to measure it out. I just rarely ever show know that, but today I want it to. But now that I've got my 8 ounces of macaroni noodles, I'm just going to dump that into some boiling salted water. Gonna cook those until they're tender, and then I'm gonna drain them and rinse them under cold water. So while that pasta was cooking, I'm gonna get started on the dressing that's gonna coat all of that pasta. So, you start off with about 4 tablespoons of cream cheese. Now, it needs to be room temperature, but sometimes I forget that. So I am gonna pop it in the microwave, but right before I realized that it just didn't look like 4 tablespoons, so I decided to add in a little bit more. And now that looks right to me, I put it in the microwave for about 20 seconds, I would say. That's going to make it easy to incorporate into everything else. So next, I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of sour cream. I love this little Pampered Chef measuring cup. Makes it really easy to, dump in stuff like sour cream, mayo, peanut butter, just stuff that you don't really want to sit there and scrape out of a regular measuring cup. But I did do a 1/2 cup of mayo, and I'm also going to do the juice of 1 whole lemon. I could tell this one was going to be really nice and juicy just by the way it kind of bounced back when I squeezed it. Also, a little seed went there, but I got it out. I'm also going to add in a little less than a teaspoon of some salt, about a 1/2 teaspoon of some garlic powder, and then plenty of black pepper. And then with the same spatula that I intend to mix everything in this pasta salad with, I'm just going to get this dressing, stir it together real good, get it nice and smooth. And then I'm going to grab my bacon, and I'm going to fry up 4 slices. So once that's nice and crispy, I will of course add it to a paper towel lined plate, crumble it up. But while that bacon was cooking, I was getting my jalapeños prepped. So I've got 3 here, but I actually only ended up using 2 of them. And, I scraped out the seeds and the membranes and all that with a small spoon. And then I'm just showing you how I diced it up. I just cut it into thin strips first, turn it the other way, and just diced it as small as I could. And, sometimes when I'm chopping or working with jalapeños, I like to wear gloves. But these were not spicy at all. And I knew that because I used the same ones for the taco stuffed baked potatoes. So I had no issues with those like burning my hands. But you need a 1/2 cup's worth. And the recipe actually calls for pickled jalapeños, but I decided to swap it with fresh. And also in the comments, a lot of people said to double the dressing, so I did, and I'm glad that I did, or else it would have been like dry. But I added in that cooked and cooled pasta, added in the jalapeños. I'm adding in some shredded extra sharp cheddar cheese. I actually intended on cubing up some cheese, but last minute I decided to just go with the shredded. Either or would be perfect. And then I added in most of that cooked and crumbled bacon, but I reserved a little bit just so that I could add it to the top at the end. But I'm just getting everything all folded together. It's going to look really creamy, almost a little bit too creamy, but if you've ever cooked pasta before, you know how quickly pasta absorbs any type of sauce. So as it sits in the fridge, I promise you it's going to work out perfect. So here I am adding the remainder of that bacon to the top, and I'm just going to get it covered up. This is one of those pasta salads that is better after it's refrigerated, so I let that sit in the fridge for a couple of hours. So to go along with it, I'm going to be making these boneless country style pork ribs. It has been a hot minute since I have cooked with these, and as you can see, this is such a cheap cut of meat. I actually bought another little small pack because I wasn't too sure that family pack would have been enough, but it ended up being enough, so I just popped that little one in the freezer. But I got a cookie sheet out, and I got a large piece of tin foil. You want a lot of overhang because we're going to wrap these up, so make it big. I was going to take each little rib one by one, and I'm just going to pat them dry with a paper towel. had every intention of making my own little rub to coat these ribs in, but I didn't realize that I was out of chili powder. So I just reached for this grind staff all-purpose rub. It basically had everything going on in there that I wanted anyways. And, you know, we've used this many a times. I know that we really like it, so no biggie there. But I'm just doing a good thick coating on the top, and then with my opposite hand, I like to press in those seasonings to make sure that they're really going to stick, and then I'm going to get them all flipped on over. And then I'm just going to season the other side heavily as well. And, you know, you can even do this the day before. Wrap it up and let it sit in the fridge to marinate. That's actually what the recipe says to do, but I didn't plan ahead enough, which they still turned out great. But just so you know, you can definitely prep this ahead of time to make dinner time go even quicker. But now I'm just taking that tin foil and folding it up as tightly as I can. You don't want to let any steam escape because we're going to cook these low and slow so they can be extra juicy. So my oven was set to 300 degrees and I popped those in for an hour and a half. And now I'm just coming in and carefully folding that tin foil back. And with my turkey baster, I'm going to get some of that liquid out. I want to get most of it out, but I still want to leave a little bit because, again, we want to keep these nice and juicy. So that's how much I ended up taking out. And now these are ready to be barbecued. So I'm going with this Carolina Gold barbecue sauce by Duke's. This one is so good if you have never tried it before. I've had this bottle in my fridge for quite a while, so I definitely needed to get that used up. So just went ahead and finished that off. And then I'm just taking my silicone brush and getting that barbecue sauce spread out better. I'm making sure to kind of break these apart so that barbecue sauce can run down the sides. I also am going to crank my oven up to 350 degrees, and I'm going to pop these in for a final 30 minutes to kind of caramelize. Here's what they look like straight from the oven. I think that those look so delicious, and they absolutely were. I have made these many times in the past, and they're always good, but they dry out so easily. But this method was so good for keeping them juicy. And that pasta salad, that is going to become my personality for this summer. Like, if I'm invited anywhere, that's what I'm gonna take because it was just that good. And I definitely wanted to kind of break into these and show y'all how soft they are and just how easily they pulled apart. They were seriously so good. And, you know, if you wanted another side to go with this, I suggest some cornbread muffins. I just shared how I make my coleslaw. I think it was like 4 videos back, but I'm just going to share it again because, you know, my husband and I love it. I cannot get my kids to try it. I wish that I could. I'm sure they'll like it one day. It's all good. But yeah, I'm just going to share it again. Maybe you missed it last time. So I like to start with a small head of cabbage, and I only use half of it. That's more than plenty. I always take out the core, and here I am just taking that other half of the cabbage and putting it in a Ziploc bag. I'm just gonna stick that in my fridge and hopefully find another use for it here soon. But I'm gonna cut it in half because I am gonna be running it through my rotating cheese grater. My husband got me this. I think he ordered it from a TikTok shop. He got it for me for Christmas, and I absolutely love it. I also use my simple box cheese grater for this, and that works really good too. But like I always say when I talk about my coleslaw, I have to have it shredded small and fine like this. Like, I don't really care for the pre-shredded bags of cabbage. Like, I'll eat it and I won't complain, like, if it's served to me. But if I'm making it at home, I want to shred it myself. So just want to show you how perfect and light and fluffy that texture is. That's why I love this coleslaw. Now, here's those shredded carrots that I had in my fridge. My main reason for wanting to make some more coleslaw. I just added a big handful to it. I don't want it to be, like, too many carrots. This was the perfect amount. So just going to get it stirred together good, and then I'm going to pull out my mayonnaise. I like to use either Duke's or Hellmann's for this. And I never measure anything for my coleslaw. So sometimes I'll do like 3 big spoonfuls. This time I felt like it needed 4, so I went with 4. I always do a small splash of vinegar. I like to do about 2.5 spoonfuls of just some regular granulated sugar. And then I go in and just kind of eyeball some salt and black pepper. And that is it ingredient-wise for this coleslaw. So I'm just going to get everything stirred together good. And like I always say, it may look like it's a little bit on the dry side, but this is one of those dishes that has to sit in the fridge before you serve it. If you took a bite of it right now, you're going to think something's wrong. It has to set and soak for a little bit. It's definitely best like if you can do it a day in advance, but a few hours should do the trick. It's going to all thin out and be perfect. Now, this coleslaw is going to go alongside some strombolis. Now, I know that Stromboli means something different to everyone, but if you are local to me, you'll know that, if you go to any restaurant around here, they will sell what's called a Stromboli box, and this is the exact type of sandwich that they serve. And I saw this at Save-A-Lot, and, I looked for this at Walmart and Kroger, and they don't have anything like it. So as far as I can see, Save-A-Lot is the only place that sells these, but I am telling you right now, and this is game-changing information, again, if you are local to me, these taste identical to what the restaurants around here use for their Stromboli, and that is like one of my husband's favorite things to order out, so I'm so excited about this discovery. I almost wonder if this is exactly what they use. I'm just following the instructions on the back of that bag. As you can see, everything comes with it. The bread, the meat, the cheese, the sauce. Like, it's all in that one bag for, I think it was around $15. It's either a little bit less or a little bit more, but definitely under $16. So the first thing I'm going to do is cook the little beef patties, I guess what you'd call them. And then, after they have been in for a certain amount of time, you pop the bread in the oven to cook alongside with it. These are the fries that I am going to deep fry, the Great Value battered seasoned French fries. These are so good. So I was deep frying those as I was getting all this going. And that was actually chaos because I was using my Dutch oven to cook those fries. And I don't know what was going on, but it kept bubbling up and like wanting to almost like boil over. Like I had to stand over it, which just made it so aggravating. I have no idea why it did that because I was cooking a very small amount at a time and I didn't have too much oil in the pot. I don't know. It was so weird. But anyways, as you can see, here I am assembling the sandwiches. I put the meat on the bottom buns and then I'm just adding the pizza sauce to the top. It had more than plenty. I had to go back and do 2 rounds of that. And I'm just taking the back of my spoon, getting that pizza sauce spread out better. And then I'm just taking that shredded mozzarella cheese that it came with. It was still a little bit frozen here, but it was mostly thawed. And got that on there, pop that in the oven to melt. And then as for the top buns, this is optional, but this is just something extra I wanted to do. But I'm just taking some butter. I'm just using the Blue Bonnet kind, not real butter, because it just spreads so quickly and nicely, and we like it. So I'm just spreading a good amount of butter onto each one of those top buns, and then I decided to take a little bit of Lawry's garlic salt and sprinkle that all over top of the butter so it can be kind of salty and garlicky. And, I'm going to toast that up in the oven. So I'm just going to place that on top of the Stromboli, as we call it. And these are big, as you can see. Like, my husband could eat a whole one, but me and the kids could only eat half. So you could possibly get 8 servings out of this. So I just think that's good. So there's those fries once I finally got them done. And I got my little bowl of coleslaw on the side. And I'm telling you, it fulfilled my craving. It was seriously so good. I'm really excited about finding that at Save-A-Lot. And let me know down in the comments if this is like a sandwich that you're familiar with. This has been a thing since I've been born. Like, this is what I've always thought to be a Stromboli. But that is going to wrap up the video. I really hope that it was helpful. I want to thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all on the next one.